Erica, this year is 100 years since Glinda of Oz was published posthumously a year after L. Frank Baum's death. What are your thoughts on Glinda of Oz? Have you read it?
It's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember it had a profound impact on me. I mean, this is the first book since Marvelous Land that we see Glinda in the forefront. I mean, actually take action and do something that has a big effect on Oz. And not only that, but there are huge undertones about themes on war, which make sense for the time because World War I was just starting.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't think about it in that context. I think for me, one of the things that you've probably just mentioned, and Glinda is one of my favourite Oz books. I think it's well written. I like the fact that Glinda has a central role, although to a degree it's almost Ozma's book as well.
True.
But yeah, actually, now you think about it, yeah, it's the first time she's had such a fundamental role and big role in the story since Marvelous Land, apart from maybe when she shuts Oz off at the end of the Emerald City, but she's not in that much particularly. This one, yeah, it's a very strong female story again, very much like Marvelous Land. You've got Dorothy and Ozma and being the central characters. You've got Glinda and the three adepts that have to help to overcome the magic that's containing them. It is one I read when I was very young and only ever got to read it once, and I remember enjoying it greatly.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that usually, I mean, throughout the series, we are reminded that Glinda is a very powerful magic user. I mean, because like you said, she, cut off Oz from the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, in TikTok of Oz, practically with a snap of her fingers, she sent the Oogaboo army out of Oz. I mean, nobody can do that in Oz pretty much. Only she can. I mean, she's the only one who's ever shown any actual power to do that. And here, with the exception of Marvelous Land, we actually see her in action, solving a problem and actually using magic.
Yeah, that's why I kind of appreciate it, because she just shows up in other books at the end to kind of help save the day, whereas this one, you see a lot more about the thought process, and she leads. It's not just all on her. She uses the magic of those around her. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We see her as a leader, as a feminist role model, but also she's not, she's not bossy, so to speak. She knows how to work with others.
Yeah.
Basically an ideal role model in a sense. And which is why we see why Ozma looks up to her.
Yeah, and I think it's that old fairy kind of magic again, and I think also it really cements Oz magic as like a science of magic as well. I think it brings into it that I think Thompson loses a little bit actually, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, she loses a lot of that.
Yeah, and
she loses a lot of those things.
Glinda is barely ever used in her works as well. Cool. So it was great to get your thoughts on Glinda. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi. So Peter Hanff, founder of the OzCon, WinkyCon. This year, one of our themes is the 100-year anniversary of L. Frank Baum's Glinda of Oz, written before, published in 1920, posthumously after L. Frank Baum was died when it was published. What are your thoughts on Glinda of Oz being at 100 years, and your thoughts on the book, please?
I haven't read Glinda of Oz in a number of years, so I should probably reread it during its anniversary year. I remember enjoying the book. It is a curious book because it relies a little bit on a combination of magic and mechanical engineering. And that was not unusual in L. Frank Baum's writing. He started doing that very early. In 1901, he did The Master Key, which has a boy character named Rob who experiments with electricity. But in fact, it's not just a scientific fantasy tale, it's also a magical fantasy tale. And so that is something that we do see in Baum. And then we've got TikTok of Oz, who's a wind-up mechanical man who is animated, can think, can speak, but has technical problems challenging him. So we do see an aspect of that in Glinda of Oz. So in that sense, it seems to me to carry on a theme of the Oz books and the Baum books for a long period of time. The idea that you could have your brains tinned or canned, as we say in the States, rather than having them in your head, is kind of an amusing thing. It never did much for me as a child reader. I thought it was a little bit silly, which I still think it is, but I love the illustrations in that book. They're a bit more formal, a bit more detailed than had been true for the Oz books that immediately preceded it for a while. Neil was getting very casual in his style at that point, so much so that there was a brief interval when Baum really wanted Neil not to continue being the illustrator. The publisher understood that the readers liked Neil, and so they worked with Neil and Baum to kind of move it forward. So in a strange way, I can see what Baum is talking about. He wanted his books to be illustrated with great humor and kind of comic character, the way Denslow had originally done it. Denslow's drawings are much less realistic. You can see Denslow's Scarecrow and Tin Woodman behind my head. They're much more like cartoon characters, but with the death of Baum, I see that Glinda of Oz is much more formal in its depictions, and I kind of like that because I like that aspect of Neil's art.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think you've raised some points that I think very similarly on. So the mechanical theming and the magic mixed together has always been a strength of Baum's, more so than many other fantasy writers. I think he understood how technology would go and how magical it felt, particularly back then with like TikTok. But I think for me with Glinda, the great thing about it is that the female characters, as they always do in Baum books, but particularly this one, it's a very strong central theme of Glinda, and it's Ozma's story more than Glinda's, but it's all about Glinda, Dorothy, and Ozma, and the three adepts overcoming this magical power, working together in some way. And I think that's always been a central vein through Baum's books, and it's nice to see it kind of, I suppose, segued at the end of his death, that really he themes it around strong women, and it's a good read. I enjoyed it when I first read it as a child, and I enjoyed it as an adult. The only thing I would say that is noticeable is it's somewhat devoid of humour, other than maybe say things like the can for brains, which is to give a political allegory at times at the way perhaps people take from other people. But I think because it was partially re-edited by his son, that maybe there was never a chance for Baum to put in a lot of his puns that he would normally have done.
Actually, I think I can expand what you just said. I actually think Baum wrote the book entirely because the manuscript survives, and it's all in his handwriting. And Warren Hollister looked at it in greater detail than I did and said to me back at the time, Ozma Baum had the manuscript. There were 3 manuscripts that survived the Great Fire that Maud Gage apparently did. She burned everything up in the trash burner because she thought the books had been published, the manuscripts were useless. But 3 books survived: Magic of Oz, The Tin Woodman of Oz, and Glinda of Oz. And I don't know the order in which they were written, but Glinda of Oz was a book that had been written a while before it was published, and I think even before Tin Woodman, perhaps. So its handwriting is good and strong in its Baum's handwriting. And what Warren's reaction to it surprised me, was interesting to me. It was amazing to him to see something that was so close to the actual published words, because we tend to think of writers editing and correcting and improving their language. But those 3 manuscripts of Baum they're longhand manuscripts in his distinctive handwriting, but there are very few word changes in them. So I do think that this really is a complete book by L. Frank Baum.
That's interesting to hear. And I suppose as well, perhaps the humour side, at the end of the day, he was very sick in bed writing these books. So yeah. I suppose you do tend to be somewhat humorless when you know the end is near.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a great book from the point of view. It was his last ever book to be written as well. but it also does lead on to the series continuing after Baum's death. Thank you for your thoughts on that, Peter. I appreciate that in the thoughts of everybody else celebrating the 100 years, because it's still surprising.
I'm looking forward to a fresh rereading of the book now that you've asked me the questions.
Yeah, I intend to do my annual rereading of the book, which I usually do before the convention, as one of our themes is often one of the centenaries of the books recently.
Do you do well at our quizzes?
I haven't done the quizzes for a few years because running the convention, you really don't have time, as you'll appreciate. However, the first couple of quizzes I did, I usually do quite well, and I did quite well at It's a Bomb, guessing the characters, because I am that Oz fan that has read all the famous 40 in depth and does remember a lot of details that maybe other people would not.
Good.
Okay. Thank you for your time again, Peter.
Yeah, thank you for asking your good questions, and I will look forward to seeing this come through in our convention.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bye.